Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Creating Work and Working Creatively, an open online training program as part of the AMP Music program that is being curated by Finton Bay Arts. This part of the program is aimed at sharing knowledge, experience, and opinion on how to sustain your passion for music and art, whether that be turning it into a career or just finding peace within creating and fulfilling your passion in some way. This week, I'm joined by Mark Maxwell, a Glasgow-based DJ, producer, record label owner, record store worker, shall we say, and stalwart of the global underground dance music scene. Mark's been in the game for over 20 years and has worked in many various different guises within the creative community. He's a good friend of mine and someone who I'm constantly stealing music from. So we're in good company tonight. Tonight, we're going to be chatting about his experience within these roles that I mentioned above, how they've changed, and our observations on how we all contribute to this culture that we love and enjoy, and what we can do to sustain our roles within it. But before we dive into any of that, I would like to welcome Mark.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. I've had a bit of a busy day. Trying to fix Wi-Fi for one of my other jobs, which feels like trying to learn magic. I don't really understand it, but here we are.
Yeah, a lot of that goes off of my head as well. I'll have to admit, to be honest. But
how's things with you? What's been going on?
I'm good. I've just finished work myself about an hour ago. I was at the shop today, so fairly, so day midweek.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's the time of year, isn't it? It's the kind of so period between the end of winter and spring where you just kind of everyone's just patiently or impatiently waiting for it to.
It's a bit it's a bit miserable. I think like a lot of people talk about January being the depressing month, but I kind of think it's more February when that starts to kick in. Like
you have this you kind of prepare yourself for January, and then you forget that you've still got another month to get through before.
Exactly. And you still get a little bit of, endorphins running through your system from Christmas in January, but February's when it really starts to bite, I think. Yeah.
That's true. Well, listen, anyway, enough about endorphins and whatnot. Let's crack on. So for those who regularly tune in, this part is kind of standard by now, but we usually like to get started with a little bit of a better understanding of each guest and their background. So Mark, if you'd like to maybe share a little bit more about yourself, how you first became interested in the creative community, and what is like kind of how you've ended up where you are now.
Okay, so I guess I started DJing probably about really properly, I say properly, but maybe when I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
So that's over 2 decades now, which is pretty mental.
Yeah.
And, it was just a hobby, obviously, to start with. I mean, it still is, to be honest, to a certain degree. And I was kind of fiddling about music making as well. And then I guess, comes to sort of occupational stuff. I started working at Radio 1 on John Peel's show, and subsequently Fabio and Groove Rider's show also.
Wow.
When I was 20, part of a BBC sort of talent seeking program, and miraculously ended up getting the gig. So moved down to London, did that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Moved back up here to do some freelance work for BBC Scotland, and all the while obviously continuing to sort of DJ, consume music, not so much making music, but still very much involved in it. And for the next, I guess, the next kind of 5 to 10 years is a bit sort of patchy. I sort of did various jobs, like I did regular jobs, and I think that's kind of important to kind of talk about that also, because it's not always a linear ascension to greatness. I was doing some like freelance writing,
cool,
for some kind of internet publications, DJing bits and bobs, you know, all the while, you know, I was a postman for like the better part of 10 years.
Wow. Yeah.
After that, like towards the end of my 20s, I started working at Rubadub when I was still a postman, actually, part-time at the shop.
Wow.
And then was offered a full-time gig there doing distribution at the warehouse. So I started that when I was about 30, and I've been at Rubadub pretty much ever since, to be honest. And kind of throughout, kind of post 30, definitely doing more DJ gigs and, you know, definitely more kind of music stuff in terms of creation, etc., and technology side of things too. So yeah, that's a kind of brief summary.
That's a brief overview
of the past 2 decades of my life.
I mean, that's how we met, was through Rubadub, you know, like coming in and buying records, and kind of you then noticing like the sort of taste in music of the people that are coming in regularly, and then picking out records for them, or like just like aligning in certain ways down to musical taste and whatnot. I'm really intrigued about the first instance of, you know, like you saying you were like, you know, messing around a little bit with making music when you were 17 and DJing and whatnot. Was there like a moment that was like quite like a defining moment that you can remember, that you were like, oh, this is definitely like a culture I want to be a part of? Or was there something that kind of hooked you in for that? Or did you just kind of find yourself naturally be attracted towards it?
Yeah, kind of naturally. I mean, it seems so appealing to me when I was young, like, you know, culturally and the music. And I kind of started getting into electronic dance music, for want of a better term, before I was old enough to get into clubs. So, you know, I'd be listening to like Richie Hawtin mixes, Jeff Mills, stuff like that. So I guess my kind of interaction with club music was before I could even get into a club, really. Wow. So it's, I guess it's kind of interesting that, you know, how you engage with music that I guess has a specific purpose, but you're engaging it out with that purpose, which is the same for a lot of people, you know, like,
through accessibility and, you know, like, there's a lot, like I grew up in a really rural area where the charity where Fintorn Bay Arts is based, and there's just no clubs, you know. There was like Joanna's Club, which was just this like kind of seedy club underneath a cinema that only played like ska, and I was too young to go to it, but I was listening to lots of dance music. I mean, forgive me, but Head Candy, all that kind of stuff when I was first getting into it. I remember going to Magaluf on like a lad's holiday after finishing secondary school, and being absolutely enamored by being able to get into clubs, because I've been listening to music. I've been listening to like God's Kitchen and all this kind of stuff, and then you're in a club, and it totally changes how you perceive it in that first instance. You're like, it makes, because you have a personal connection with it, but then all of a sudden it makes sense in a way wider context, because you're like, oh, okay, it's coming from a massive sound system, there's dancers, you know, like it's like hedonistic, it's very arresting in terms of your first experience, I think.
It's a complete assault on the senses. I mean, you know, I remember the first club I ever went to was, I think, it was a club night called Test, which was started by Neil Landstrom, Dave Tarida, Tobias Schmidt, that crew. And we were kind of really into that stuff before we started, like, before we were old enough to go clubbing. So that was naturally the first kind of thing we wanted to go to. And it was mental, you know, it was so loud, like it was full of, you know, these
all sorts of
crazy people, like, like dancing. And it was great. I mean, it was quite, I wouldn't say scary, but like intimidating, but in a good way, you know, where you're kind of like, you feel like you kind of shouldn't be there, in a way that's quite exciting, you know. And that was definitely how I felt in my formative years going clubbing.
I think I think like we're going to touch upon it later on, but like I still like a good club night. It still gives me those feelings. Like even
For sure. Yeah.
after it becoming kind of part of the landscape that like we both live in constantly, and like part of the furniture. Even
Yeah.
like a good club night or a good dance or a good festival can, like, you can find yourself back in that, like in those moments of being like, this almost feels not taboo to be doing it, but like
Yeah.
it feels quite risky, and
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
like, you're pushing yourself, and you can see people pushing themselves, and
Yeah.
obviously in a safe way a lot of the times, sometimes not, but we won't get into that. But the I think that is the, like, the magic of it. It never, you can like, it can take one spark and you're back to that moment, and it's
It's
inspiring
always
again.
there. It's you
Yeah,
can tap into it, and if I think it's like I think it's one of those sense things where you're so bombarded in that environment. The senses are so kind of not under
overloaded.
attack, but there's a lot. There's like there's smells, there's sounds, there's sights. Like it's all coming at you at once, and that's definitely it can be triggering in a good way. Like,
Yeah,
and I still, it still happens to me, like
yeah.
occasionally, which is
You get
great. I mean,
that.
I feel really lucky and privileged
Yeah.
that I can still feel like
20
that.
years later, you can
Yeah,
still,
exactly.
you get
Yeah,
that, tingle up your spine sort of
big
thing,
time.
the
Yeah,
hairs on the
yeah.
back of your neck raise up. That's
Hmm.
really interesting. Well, that kind of brings on to the next question I have, which is, because you've got such a extensive range within roles that you've done within the creative community, and talking about like other more traditional work roles during periods of downtime. But
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you have any observations on the differences between what the scene was like when you first were getting involved, and maybe and how you see it now.
I mean, the big thing would probably be the internet. I mean, it's not as if like the internet didn't exist when I started, DJing or going out. I'm not that old, but it's just far like that. That's the big change. Like there was no, there was no YouTube, there
Yeah.
was no Spotify, there's no Bandcamp, there's there was Napster, there was SoulSeek, that was it. Like, you could look up things on Discogs, but obviously there's no social media either. So you didn't have this ready access to like what kind of people were doing. You would have to kind of seek it out more. And I'm assuming that, like, even at that stage it was still fairly easy to find out information about things through the internet, but it wasn't as kind of prominent, and
It
maybe
wasn't.
it's in your
Yeah.
face like as it is now. So I think that is a big change.
It's become a tool. It's become like the main driving tool in the toolbox of how we produce and promote and ingest a lot of
And
art
consume.
and music now.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, it's really interesting because for a lot, I mean, this program's for 16 to 25-year-olds, and I guess, like Wi-Fi has been the thing for their whole lives, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whereas I remember trying to like listen to songs or be on like MSN Messenger, and like you'd be on dial-up internet, and you just wouldn't be able to load anything. The best you're going to get is like a picture, and it's going to load in like 10 minutes, especially if you live somewhere rurally. There's no way. Do you know what I mean?
I remember like when I first downloaded, when I first got SoulSeek, because I was like, this is amazing. I can get like music that, I just couldn't get otherwise. Like, because there was no, like I said, there was no Bandcamp, there was no Spotify. So unless you could go into a shop and actually buy
physically buy the records.
tunes, there was no way you could get it. So it was a great resource, but like back then it would take you a whole day to download one tune,
Totally.
So I think like for like all that people kind of moan about the internet, and sometimes rightfully so, I think, in my opinion, the pros outweigh the cons in a lot of ways, because it's massively diversified and democratized a lot about what this stuff is, whether it's DJing or music production or just having access to like YouTube as a resource is incredible. Like, you can like prior to that, if you wanted to get into making music with machines, you would you would have to read the manual, you know,
Yeah,
and they're not
right.
always that intuitive. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's
It can
breaking
be.
down barriers. It's really like, you know, it's an amazing
And
resource.
finding, like,
Yeah.
also being able to find, like, common communities that you align with more easily
Yes.
through
Yeah.
the internet, and feel part of something and feel represented in a way that maybe, yeah, you would have to physically seek out back in
Yeah.
the day, and that wouldn't always be possible because whether, you know, like living situation, financial situation, just
Yeah.
accessibility, whatnot. I definitely think it does. Definitely, the pros outweigh. There are a lot of negatives, but
Yeah.
it's as it becomes more and more, well, it is the norm now. You know, like, people are growing up with it, so they're aware of it, and the
It's
enormity of
almost
it goes
cliched to
unconscious
talk
from the
about.
outset, you know, rather
Yeah.
than learning it after the fact, so to speak.
Exactly. It's almost trite to talk about the internet because it's such a, you know, it's just such a part of the furniture of everyday
Yeah,
life that, like, even mentioning it, so that just sounds
I know.
like
Chill
weird, to
parade.
be honest. So yeah, there you go.
Right. Well, listen, what we'll do is, just for folks who might want to know a little bit about you musically, we'll play a couple of minutes of your If Only podcast, which is one of my favorite mixes. And I was listening
Thank
to
you.
it a couple of days ago, and there's a specific part where, yeah, you're blending a couple of tracks in, and I think it definitely resonates with how I interact with your music. So yeah, we'll pop that on, and then we'll get into talking about dance music a bit more, and its popularity and the effects of that.
Cool.
Nice. Brilliant. I think that's honestly, like, that's one of my favorite parts of that whole mix. Just when you bring in that, I've forgotten the name of the track, but with that crazy vocal and like the church bells coming in on top.
I think that's a Jezebel tune. I can't quite remember. There's
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
the section you played there's a couple of edits that I made of those tracks with like some stuff over the top
Interesting.
but
Interesting.
I mean I guess that mix is a strong kind of representation of what the kind of style I like to do,
Yeah.
like to play in clubs,
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of stripped back and
It's
bass
percussive. There's a
heavy
lot
and
of low
percussive,
end.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and kind of not strictly for. I mean,
Mm.
obviously, I like all sorts of music, but yeah, and in clubs that I find that stuff fun to play.
Yeah, I will say that as well for anyone who is watching live. I do apologize because the sound quality is not great, but when it goes up on the upload, we will be uploading apart from the original file and overdubbing it. So if you do want to have a proper listen, also just check it out anyway. It's worth listening to the whole thing. But let's move on. I'd like to talk a little bit about dance music popularity and kind of the effects of that in how we engage with it. And so, I mean, dance music has kind of arguably never had such a mainstream popularity as it does now. I mean, that, in my opinion, anyway. And lots of once kind of niche underground sounds are becoming parts of like resurgencies and revivals and find themselves in popular culture more and more. And I was wondering, how do you think this has impacted the way that we kind of view and interact with the culture surrounding it all?
I mean, it's a good question. Like, I think what's quite specific about them at the moment in terms of dance music being popular is that it's definitely, it seems to be more credible forms of dance music, and I mean I say that for a serious lack of a better term,
Yeah.
but there's like there's a lot of things that are very popular now that you wouldn't have really thought would be that big kind of 5 to 8 years ago. Look at Deck Mantle,
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's like that's pretty massive. Like
Yeah.
obviously, like Boiler Rooms, things like that. Like these have all became huge platforms
Yeah. Yeah.
for pushing new music, and there is obviously a massive resurgence in things like house and techno. Latterly, people are kind of going back to kind of more breakbeat influence sounds like jungle, drum and bass,
Yeah.
hardcore stuff like that. Which is great because there's a lot of there's a younger generation that are kind of finding out about that music for the first time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and how forward thinking and experimental some of that music was, and not just like jungle and hardcore, but
Mm,
house techno.
mm,
Like
mm.
a lot of that early stuff was really kind of sometimes totally unclassifiable.
Yeah.
It was only after the fact that it became sort of it fitted into like specific kind of genre paradigms. But yeah, I mean it's definitely things like social media, streaming have kind of in general enabled like kind of what were once more obscure forms of music to be in the limelight a bit more.
Yeah.
And especially like underground DJs,
Yeah.
I say
I mean,
underground, but like it's I think some people kind of find that word a bit weird. Like
yeah,
I
it's
guess
loaded.
it can have it's a loaded term, exactly, but it's kind of like there's an argument that a lot of this stuff that you would consider underground actually isn't underground anymore,
Yeah.
and a lot of the time for the better. Like why
Yeah.
not? It's
I mean, and it's like that's it. Like it was underground in its maybe infancy or its inception because it was so, like you say, kind of bleeding edge and futuristic and unclassifiable. But now with these revivals, I mean, we talked about it on Sunday. Like DJ Storm,
yeah.
she's doing bits. She's playing more and more than she had like I think I read an interview, and she was, you know, she hadn't been behind the decks in like 5 years or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And rightly so, you know, she's like a pioneer of that sound, and
yeah,
being able to like share her voice with a younger crowd and influence a younger generation into making now even more, like not even more, like just as interesting and unclassifiable and future sounding versions of this original stuff that was in, yeah, like we say, it was unclassifiable at its like in its inception. And it kind of like it's cyclical, you know. I think
yeah,
we find that we've got people like, like you know, DJ Crust, we've got yeah, DJ Storm, people like that are, and like Elijah and whatnot in the grime scene. And
yeah,
these are like all people, like kind of figureheads of that scene, and they're able to enjoy a resurgence in the popularity of their music, and that then enhances that whole aspect of the music that they're into, and informs and influences a whole new generation of people who are going to then do the same thing that they were doing, which is mess around with machines and try new things and make mistakes and end up making something completely new and exciting, and it pushes it constantly further and forward.
yeah, exactly. I think like in the whole kind of aspect of these forms of music being more obscure, when they were kind of around the kind of origin periods, was a lot to do with localism. You know, they were kind of specific to certain geographic areas,
Yeah,
and obviously pre kind of internet, that would have been harder to spread out in a bigger way.
yeah.
But now you've got this huge network, and it's a really interesting melting pot, because you've got people. I mean, you look at like, you know, drum and bass is a good example, right? Because it's quite a lot of people who have operated within that genre are sort of tended to stick to it. And it became kind of very like, you know, there's a certain way to do this, like certain sets of production values, like this is the sound, this is how you do it. But the more that gets spread out, and you know, the more people who are out with that kind of inner circle
Yeah,
bring new things to the table, and you get
yeah,
these kind of like crazy kind of hybrid mutant sort of mashups of
yeah,
genres, which are super interesting, which
yeah,
you have at the moment, which are killer, you know, like,
yeah.
yeah, there is no lack of inventiveness and
Exactly. I mean, looking at like talking
dance
about drum and
music.
bass and jungle, I mean, like someone who like instantly springs to mind is Sully.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And his production level
it's
is just
crazy. Yeah,
insane. It's
yeah,
and it's he's and it almost to the point where there's been some um like historical labels that have restarted again based on this new and inspiring stuff that they're hearing
yeah.
from young
It's sort of
producers.
it's kick-started this kind of
Yeah,
you know, like people have sort of went, oh, okay, actually, like, you know, I used to do this, like,
yeah,
you know, I used to run this like
yeah,
wildly successful label in the 90s that you know, people might be now interested in, and like they are, like they, you
yeah.
know, they can't get enough of it, and it's great.
And it's great to see the like also as well. I think that it kind of breaks down this whole I mean, this is a generalization, but like and kind of an observation, but like I think it also helps to break down the idea of like gatekeeping in certain ways, in
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
you know, like you were talking about there being like set parameters of how to make drum and bass in a certain way, and that's kind of, and then those folks who fall within that category hear this new stuff and they go, whoa, oh my god, okay, let's open up the floor, let's start
yeah,
experimenting ourselves, let's maybe restart the label, let's look at how we can adapt the label to now fit the current climate that we're in, rather than the climate it was famous within. Do you know what I mean? And so
yeah,
that
yeah.
also is it helps to breed like a platform for everyone to learn something new, which is always
Exactly. Yeah.
beneficial. Yeah.
And I mean, they can also see much more of the kind of the process that goes into that, because for every Instagram post about some guy like sitting in his studio with tens of thousands of pounds worth of you know, equipment and
Mm.
synths and whatnot, there's somebody out there making tunes on a crack copy of FL Studio
Yeah.
on a laptop. Like I seen, I can't remember who it was for, but there was it might even have been Future Music. They
Mm.
did a little piece on Ploy recently, and they had some photos
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
of his setup. It's like it's humble to say the least, you know.
Yeah. Big up
Like,
Sam.
yeah, totally. Like, and I think that's super inspiring. You know,
I
like
mean,
it's
and
like
that's it. Like when you listen to his music as well,
it's
for
crazy. Like,
anyone who isn't aware, Ploy is a very very talented producer who's making very very forward thinking and not challenging as in difficult, but challenging as in it challenges you on the dance floor when you're listening to it, when you're playing it. It pushes you to think about things a little bit differently. The time signatures on the music that he makes, and yeah, it's in he's being featured in a really prominent record magazine and talking about his setup, which was, like you say, very frugal and very, it
it's
just
like
goes to
he's got
show.
like an interface that's like, I don't know, probably it's like an old Focus, right? He's you know, it's just
Yeah,
very like sparse, and I think he's maybe using Logic, but
yeah,
I think it's super important it's more important for people to see that than it is for people to see
a huge studio.
racks of gear in someone's studio, because
Yeah,
that can actually be massively off-putting,
yeah,
because you know all that comes at a cost,
yeah.
and it also, like, you know, not to mention the kind of lifetime that people put into learning about this kind of
Mhm,
stuff,
mhm,
when it's like, I don't know, like when I started making music, and I still do, I find those kind of scenarios very inspiring, whether you can go,
mhm,
right, I can actually, you know, people make this insane, innovative, forward thinking music
mhm.
on, you know, like just a very kind of minimal setup.
Yeah. It just goes to show, like, obviously, yeah, like the accessibility to having all of these expensive pieces of equipment is just not there.
Yeah,
And the great thing is now you're seeing studios being set up. I mean, Batu and Hodge
yeah,
from Time Dance with they've set up a studio down in Bristol, and
yeah.
it's free. I mean, it's fully booked, like all for the rest of the year. Like I
I'm not
inquired about it
surprised. Yeah,
myself,
yeah,
and it's there's equipment there that you can turn up with your laptop, and you add a plug-in or you add a synth or like whatever, and you can use those pieces of equipment, so you
yeah,
can get the best of both worlds as well. But it's not it's not a necessity anymore. It never was, but it's even less so now, I think, with, like, yeah, the
yeah,
advent of Ableton and Fruity Loops and whatnot, being able to kind of do a lot of what these machines do, but in one operating system
yeah.
at
I
your
think
fingertips.
it's important to have access to those tools, because they can actually teach you a lot about how this stuff works. Because when you
Yeah,
open Ableton, it's not always, you're not always fully aware of like what the kind of cause and effect.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
much more apparent with hardware,
yeah.
and you know, I mean, I've been using hardware for quite a long time, and it's not through. I just prefer it. I
Yeah,
prefer kind of, you know, the that it's tactile, but also I'm in a privileged position where I can have access to that stuff,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
can afford it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's definitely taught me more about synthesis and sound
Mhm,
processing
mhm.
than maybe I would have done just through Ableton.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah,
like initiatives like setting up studios that are accessible to people who wouldn't normally have that privilege is amazing, you know, and
yeah,
totally like essential actually.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you.
The government should
Um,
be funding that, I think,
yeah,
like, you
absolutely.
know, yeah,
These are the outreach things that they should be doing, but I
yeah,
mean,
totally.
we're seeing it being just drained completely over the last 5-10 years, and it will continue to be. But
Unfortunately,
that's a
yes.
bigger conversation
Yeah, it
take
certainly
us
is.
days. In terms of like music popularity and in terms of like career wise, um, how do you think it with the rise in music popularity and with like with social media and things like that, do you think it's affected the way folks manage their careers, and if so, kind of how?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think I don't. I, yeah, it's difficult to say for me personally, because I didn't really know that many people who were doing this like sort of 15 years ago. So, but I get the impression that it is, and I think, you know, for all the kind of pros that we've talked about, there is a part of this in terms of, you know, DJing specifically as a career that is kind of fraught with potholes, both kind of personally and professionally. And I think, you know, there's a whole number of factors that are the cause of that. But I think, you know, expectations like a kind of a big thing. The way things are kind of perceived on social media, like, you know, like you rarely ever see the bad bits, you know,
someone out
like,
of work.
you never see somebody out of work. Like you see someone, you know, posting a video of the gig and it looks amazing, you know, and like whatever, but you don't see maybe like the kind of 48 hours in between where they're traveling, or, you know, they're kind of burned out because they've been doing it, you know, kind of 2, 3, 4 times a week for the past like 4 months, you know, which is going to take a toll massively. Not just on your physical well-being, but well, actually even more so your mental well-being. I would think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's definitely, I think we're getting to a better place with that, where more people are being honest about how this stuff affects them, and that is like totally needed. Because before it was definitely a sort of big elephant in the room, and like, you know, it kind of, if something's not acknowledged, then nobody who's coming into this is really going to learn from that, because they're not going to know about it, and then the next thing you know, they're just like,
you know, they may be
they're
in
burnt
that
out, or they're doing some crazy stuff that they never thought they would do, because like the circumstances have led them down that path, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen it, and we continue to see it in some high profile situations, and also just personally seeing it through friends who we all have friends who are, you know, like in a certain position within their career, and struggling to find balance with actually having a life outside of it. And I think it's also what we mentioned earlier, you know, you talked about being a postie and periods of downtime. That's something I think I would really like us to dive into, because like with the rise in popularity, like inevitably there's going to be a dip, or the bubble will burst as well. As it always does with anything, you know, housing, whatever. And the popularity of what we're into is completely subjective and is based on taste, and taste is something that can change instantaneously. And so it can be quite fickle, and it also can be very much influenced by sources out with yourself. And you can find yourself all of a sudden out of the, say, being flavor of the month or whatever, or maybe having a run of gigs and all of a sudden they drop down. And what's been your experience with, you know, because you've dabbled in and out with DJing professionally, and playing gigs out and traveling with that, and making music and releasing and running the record label as well. And I was wondering, what's your kind of experience over the years? Like, if you have any kind of wisdom or advice or observations from being in amongst periods of busyness and popularity, and then noticing ebbs and flows within that as well.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is quite markedly different from the touring DJ, because I've never been a touring DJ, because I've never really wanted to be honest. Like, you know,
that's a really good point as well. I think that's something
I would personally find that difficult. It would have an adverse impact on my kind of enjoyment of this thing. You know, I kind of want to still keep it fun and enjoyable for myself, and actually more of a hobby and less of a job. Although, you know, obviously I'm willing to take the job part of it to a certain degree. So that has obviously meant that I can't make a living out of it. You know, like I've had to do other work as a result, but that's kind of, for me, fine. Like I would kind of rather do that anyway.
Would you say would you say that's in some ways helped to continue to sustain your passion for the culture as well? Because I think
1000%,
you know, like you are not necessarily getting caught up in the business side of things of it by the pressures of it being a career, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. You know? And it also means that I can say no to things like that just don't, because like everyone who, you know, if you're a DJ, basically you're going to get people asking you to do gigs, and it's not always going to be a great fit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm not saying those people who actually don't have good intentions or, but you know, sometimes it's just like, I'm always grateful for being asked, you know, like I'm always humbled and honored because there's there's so many other people out there doing this that, like, you know, it's pretty miraculous that someone would pick me out to go and play the party. So, you know, I'm always thankful for it. But you know, there's sometimes I'm like, well, actually, I don't know. I don't know if I'm the right fit for this, you know, like, and it also depends on, you know, I can be quite whimsical sometimes about, you know, what I want to play, when I want to play it, and like festivals, for instance, you know, like it's not, you know, I could play an outdoor festival during the day, like I've got the tunes to do that, but I'm really kind of in the mood to do that. Like I like playing in clubs, like in dark spaces on big sound systems and that kind of intense pressure, like
as well,
like, you know, totally. So I mean, it's also meant that the people that have booked me have like in the UK and abroad, I've built up long-standing relationships with, because, you know, I can go over, like I like to spend like a few days there. I'm always like, okay, cool, like I'd like to hang out with you guys, spend a few days, see where you live, like the city, because it's still a big novelty for me. Like I'd kind of you know, I grew up in a very sort of working class home, and we did not have a lot of money, so we didn't go on holidays abroad. So this has been a kind of a ticket to see a bit of the world, which is amazing. So like, I mean, most of the people I've played for, I would consider friends, actually, and most of them I'm still in touch with, which is, you know, that's amazing. That's a big part of it for me. Like, you know, meeting like-minded people who are into the same stuff and connecting with them. You know, there's a lot to be said for that, you know.
Absolutely. I think I think it's really important as well to when we were speaking with Natalie as well, shouts to Natalie, on Sunday, but talking about the fact that you know, like you can, of course, it's absolutely a viable option to chase it as a career, try and make something out of it full time, but you can also contribute to your culture that you love and that you're passionate about in a way that isn't about that. It's about, you know, like it doesn't have to have a, for lack of a better kind of word, like a monetary sustenance
incentive for, like, totally, of course. I mean, like, you know, there's like you say, you like, if you want to do that, like give it a bash at least, you know, like find out
and creating those connections that you say about creating friendships and relationships with people around the world that otherwise you would never have met, and it's an opportunity to choose, like you say, and also as well, as you build up a wealth of experience of the sort of gigs that you want to be playing, then promoters and people who are booking you are discerning that and are then picking you for the sort of thing where you're going to excel in that moment, because it's the exact sort of vibe that you want to be in anyway. And
it sort of feeds into itself in that way, you know, like totally. I mean, I think for some DJs, especially the more popular you become, that can feed into itself in a way that you maybe end up just quite like pigeonholed, basically. And, you know, you kind of and that might be fine. Like, you know, you might want to go out there and DJ, you know, like a specific style of music because that's really what you're into. To be honest, I'm kind of jealous of people like that in a weird way, because you know, I admire that focus. It's just something I don't have, you know. Like,
I know what you mean.
like all over the place. Like really kind of short attention span when it comes to, you know, what I'm into at any given moment.
I
I
think,
mean, yeah,
I think I have that as well. And I have this constant, like almost internal argument with myself about whether I should be like specializing and
yeah.
focusing, like if I want to do that. And then at the end of the day, it's just really important, I think, to be honest with yourself about what it is that you're passionate about, and not
Yeah.
to lose sight of that integrity within yourself,
Yeah.
and to value your worth in that regard. And that success is a funny kind of another kind of like in the context of talking about dance music production or work within the industry, it's also kind of a loaded word, because it's totally changed. Whereas you can be extremely successful in your in a passion, and it doesn't have to be something that is inherently shared with everyone, or whether it be on a, it doesn't need to be on a big stage, like
Yeah.
we're talking about even your work with Rubadub, and what you do there is, and how Rubadub has continued to and maintains its success as an institution, as times change so drastically around it as well.
Yeah.
And I think I'd like to talk a little bit about basically kind of overall goals and contributing to culture, for the love, without it needing to be a part of the career. I mean, we've kind of bridged that a little bit, but I really like, what I think resonates with me about yourself is that you are choosing to follow your passion in whatever direction it takes, and not letting yourself be, like you say, pigeonholed, or also kind of become victim to opportunity and lose sight of what it is that you're wanting to do. And I think that's something that I just really want to highlight for anyone who's like listening in and is maybe thinking about wanting to pursue a career. Like, the most important thing is that you're enjoying what you're doing, and that you're passionate about it, because the minute
Yeah,
you lose
totally.
it, people notice as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very obvious straight away,
Yeah. I think, like, if if you're not enjoying it, then because, like we were talking about earlier, that there's inevitably, like, if you start to make a name for yourself in this gig,
Mm-hmm.
and you get, a bit more well known, and that gradually increases, there's going to be a time when that decreases.
Yeah,
It's like, that's the way it goes. And
yeah,
it's that's a lot easier to deal with if you still enjoy that thing. I
yeah,
mean, you kind of talk about, uh you know me kind of choosing in choice, but there's also a lack of choice, I think,
true.
as well. It's just kind of like, I do this because I kind of have to, because
Mm,
that's what I'm
mm,
into. And it's like,
yeah,
there's like a lot of it doesn't really, I try not to think about it too hard as well.
mm, mm,
Like, I try just to kind of, like, do what makes sense, and approach it fairly naturally. And
mm.
if something feels right, then it
It
usually
will,
is right. Like,
yeah, and it
yeah,
will maybe lead to another opportunity that
yeah,
also falls within that remit.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to stay
And
away from. Oh,
what
carry
were you
on.
going to say? Sorry.
Yeah, I was, yeah, like, I would, I'd like to steer clear from kind of concepts like manifesting, but,
Yes,
like, there is an element of it to this, and
absolutely.
like it's
It's like the law of
like,
attraction in some
yeah,
respects.
yeah. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
doing this for like 20 years, and I only
Mm,
really started getting gigs in my 30s, to be
yeah.
honest,
Yeah.
and it was just like, it's sort of just been I've just been chipping away at it, like,
Yeah.
kind of under the radar, without worrying about it too much. So
Yeah.
I think it's an important thing is, like, if you want to do this and you're starting out, and you know, you want to get somewhere, or you want to do gigs, and it's not really happening, I wouldn't let that dissuade you too much, because
Yes.
it might happen down the line at some point, and if you
Yeah.
enjoy doing it, then keep doing it,
Exactly.
because,
And if you like
yeah,
you're not doing it in a vacuum, even though it may feel like it a lot of the
exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Like, it's all worthwhile experience to then, when an opportunity does arise, you're in the best possible position,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
got that integrity and that love and that passion alive, and it exudes from you. Like, you
Yeah.
see that within people, like, and you can tell.
And you're also like experienced in a weird way because you've just kind of been like you've been doing it, you've been soaking things up
Yeah,
via osmosis or like
yeah,
learning about things and kind of practicing and like honing skills here or there and
and
like
learning how
expanding your
to
knowledge base. So, like, yeah,
yeah, and learning how to actually exist within the community that you choose to be a part of, and
yeah,
learning a lot about as we are all constantly learning, but especially like a lot more recently about the roots of the music that we're into, the diversity that is bred from,
yeah,
and highlighting voices within that. And I think on the other note that you mentioned about, like kind of like the osmosis and like gleaning experience as you just kind of live this existence, whether it be successful or whether it be in a moment of ebb or downtime, is that it's still vital experience, so that if an opportunity does arise, then you're in the best possible position to maintain it if that is something that you want. Whereas
yeah, totally, yeah,
sometimes you see people have meteoric rises in a very, very short space of time, and may not have the tools necessary to be able to maintain that when they reach a certain level, and can be overwhelmed by that. And
we see that, yeah, sort of
yeah.
all the time at the moment
Yeah,
because never never has it been in dance music where you could basically turn a hobby into a profession almost overnight, and like a lot of people have been in that boat essentially. They've got pretty popular pretty quickly, and that can really sort of mess with your um yeah your compass a bit, and it
yeah,
can also like give you a false sense of security when it
yeah,
comes to maintaining a career
yes,
doing that, because it's
yeah,
like, you might be able to do this forever, but not at that level. Like
yeah,
there's almost nobody that's been able to do that. Like,
yeah.
and if there is, there's very few. Like
I
even
mean,
look at like someone like Andrew Weatherall. Like
yeah,
he's you know like how like nearly what 40 years like of a solid career. He still
yeah,
had downtime.
yeah,
He still had points and he's well, he was a total anti-careerist, and I
yes,
take a lot of points from Weatherall's philosophy personally. Like he's
yeah,
been a massive inspiration for me. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah, during his tenure
Expansive
as a
career.
producer and DJ, there's definitely points where he's even people like him have periods where they're not
Periods
really
with
doing
just
that
very
much.
little.
You know what
And
I
I
mean?
think
Like, yeah,
that's, yeah, and I think that's it. It's that managing expectation of that. I mean, social media like completely shows the alternate side of that, which is
yeah,
that everything is go all the time. And I fall for it all the time myself, even though
yeah.
I'm aware and we're talking about
Likewise,
it
yeah,
present, and conscious
yeah,
of it. It's clever enough to kind of drip feed it to you, so that
yeah,
you brainwash yourself
yeah,
gradually, and then you catch yourself and you're like, wait, no, that isn't the case. Like there are lots of people that there's a very, very small few who solely live completely on making music and touring and DJing alone. In terms of the amount of people that do it, it's a very small percentage.
yeah. And like a big part of that also is you need to be built for that.
Yeah,
Like you need to be able to handle that kind of level of intensity, especially when it comes to DJing, and especially if you're more of a kind of performative like DJ or artist,
mhm.
then that's like, yeah, it's a hard work,
Yeah,
like
and it
getting
changes. It can change quite drastically into, well, it does change quite drastically into the business end of the spectrum, taking a far greater weight and chunk of your time mentally and physically, because you then
yeah,
are responsible for a team of people per se who are representing you in certain ways. And
yeah,
then you are there's an expectation on yourself and from others. And yeah, it's something that, like, I think about a lot. I think, yeah, it would be great. Like we talked about, for example, if we had the opportunity to play once a week in like one of our favorite clubs and not do anything else, we would all do it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
that's not how it is. If you want to just be playing music solely and making music solely and not having a day job, then you have to accept that there are parameters and aspects of that, realities that come with that
Yeah.
are very difficult to maintain, and you have to be prepared to take that step and like
Yeah.
really try and run with it.
I think like, yeah, because you also can't always expect people to look after themselves, right?
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, I'm nearly 40 and I'm still pretty bad at it. Like, but so like I think, if you want to go down that road and like, and you start going down it, and you're going to end up with like probably an agent, probably a manager, maybe. Like, if I had any advice, it would be seek out someone in that line of work who's not only invested in you as an artist or a DJ or performer, but also invested in you as a human being,
Absolutely.
like, because I think these people do have a duty of care, and there is a lot of good ones like
Yes.
out there. Like, people think I'm sort of anti-agent and anti-management, but
Mm.
I'm not really. Like, I've just
No.
never needed that
Yeah.
personally,
Yeah.
So yeah, but I
I
think
think
it's necessary and great for a lot of people to do if
yeah.
they find the right match, and like, it can really have this beneficial relationship for both parties, and it can be
Symbiotic,
yeah, totally. Like, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, I think
seek out someone that's that's got your best interests at heart on like all
on a
levels.
personal level as well
Yeah,
as a
totally.
business level, so to speak. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's really important. I'm aware of the time. We are crashing towards the hour,
Oh,
but
totally. No.
we have. I would love to talk a little bit about what we talked about on Sunday. I think we might have to cut out some of the media breaks because I just want to get this point in. But
Okay.
the where like we were talking about on Sunday, the juvenile fascination, which I kind of touched on earlier, about like when we go to clubs still and we find that moment of like the hairs on the back of your neck rising up and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
and you get kind of washed over by the excitement of it. And I think it's kind of pertinent in terms of Rubadub as well,
Yeah.
which is an institution that has been going for 20 plus years as well.
30 this
And
year.
this year,
30 years this year. Yeah.
oh my word.
Yeah.
That's
3
oh yeah,
decades.
I remember. Yeah, I remember the 25th
Yeah.
year.
There'll be some
There'll be some stuff
stuff
going on.
happening. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
exciting.
To be announced.
But I think that it kind of transcribes really well to the kind of business model that Rubadub falls under in that regard, because you're all still every member of staff and every person involved in the inner workings and the kind of like running of Rubadub still find that juvenile fascination in the music that
Yeah.
is coming through. And then the other point that you mentioned on Sunday about sometimes also being aware that it's not your thing, but to be present with the fact that it is a thing. And
Yeah.
it is
Yeah. Of
something
course.
that is
Yeah.
popular. And I was wondering if you'd like to talk a little bit about that before we finish things up.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, definitely. That we're all still fans of music.
Mm, mm,
And we're all still fascinated by like new music and new technology, and that like to stay in this, like
mm.
you kind of really, that's the way it has to be.
Yeah.
I think like going back to like someone like John Peel, for instance, like that is how John stayed relevant up until the very day he died, because of
Yeah.
that juvenile fascination. And we talk about juvenile in like the best possible way,
Yes.
but this kind of like childlike fascination with
The
music, and
naivety around it as well, the like.
yeah, just like it's fascinating and
Mhm.
cool, and like there's so much there. Like I'm still like, wow, like all the time, like
Yeah.
but like it's great.
And I think that's like a very positive note to end on. We'll get a little snippet of your live set, I think,
Cool.
because that's the other arm of your creative output from DJing.
Mhm.
Obviously, also honorable mention to Concrete Cabin, the record label that you run. We've just not got time, but what we will do is
Shouts to Al.
we'll put some shouts to Al and Liam and DJ Skift
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everyone that's on
big
the
time.
roster.
Yeah, yeah,
We'll pop some links on the uploads for people to be able to check that out, the social media bits and whatnot.
cool.
But yeah, I think we will just have to cut it short there. But I think the overall point is maybe we can sum it up as manage your expectations as to what it is that you do want from this, and that also you can contribute something extremely important and vital to the culture that we all love, that doesn't have to feed into a career.
Yeah.
And it can be something that you can do it. You can have a day job, and it gives you that mental fortitude and space to be able to really dive into your passion and create something new. And then if the opportunity arises and you do want to pull on the thread of a career from that, then more power to you. But it doesn't have to be the be all and end all of it all, because you know, like it might in the long term diminish your actual enjoyment of it.
Yeah, have fun with it, you know, like, and you could apply that to anything, really, what you've just said, like, which is,
exactly.
Enjoy it, have fun, connect with people, like, you know, it'll keep you a happier and more open-minded person.
Exactly. And it
way.
also,
I think, you know,
it also, I mean, like, we've kind of spoken kind of exclusively about music, but I mean, it's all completely interlinked and interwoven with the wider culture in art and community, and kind of like progressive thinking and learning new ways of inhabiting the space that we all have to inhabit as it changes around us. And I think that is a really important, it's just a really important thing to stay present with and be aware that it doesn't have to boil down to making loads of money and playing all the time. But if that is your jam, more power to you, and good luck,
cool.
and go for it, you know, and just know what you're getting yourself into, and surround yourself with people who care about you and will put your personal needs before your professional needs when it boils down to it, when you really are needing that kind of guidance from a team, if you have that around you. But yeah, Mark, thank you so much. This is kind of flown by again, and I feel like we could have chatted for hours and hours and hours.
I could easily do another two at least, I think. But, you know, like, don't think, that, whether the people watching this would agree is another story. But
it's very ego stroking of us to say that, but no, but thank you so much. It's been really informative. And I hope that anyone who's been tuned in and anyone who catches the upload, please check out Mark's creative work. Also go into Rubadub, have a chat. He's always willing to let you see some new music and some synths and some hardware. We are gonna finish up now with a snippet from your alias, your kind of live production alias, which is Mother, and your DJ alias as well.
Just my DJ name as well.
They're kind of one and the same. Can you just give us a little bit of introduction as to what this is from and when it came about?
This is an excerpt from a live recording when I played at Room 2, which is a club in Glasgow. And that was maybe 2018. You know,
that was that the one with where they put all the Harris fencing in it?
Yes, it was.
Yes, I was there for that one.
What? Who was it again?
It was kind of like a mad live act, wasn't it? That was playing after.
I can't believe I've forgotten the name. They've done stuff on Halcyon Vale, and they're great. God, I've totally drawn a blank there. But basically, it was a kind of hybrid, kind of hardware, software setup. You know, a few bits and bobs, and that's that. And it was, if you want to hear the whole thing, it's on. Solid Blake was kind enough to broadcast it on a Rinse FM show. In its entirety. So that's on SoundCloud as well.
So if you just Google Solid Blake Rinse Mother Live, and you'll find the whole thing.
You'll get it there.
But cool. Well, we're gonna close up with that. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I'm sure we'll be at an after party together at some point very soon.
Sure we will. Nice one, Lewis.
Thank you so much.
All right, man. See you soon. Thank you.